Yo, what is up, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video. Last night, I dropped a video about the preseason, which go ahead and check that out if you haven't yet. But towards the end of that video, which y'all showed a ton of love to, by the way, appreciate y'all, I talked about how the Hornets got blown up by like 40 to the Celtics in preseason, and preseason doesn't matter, like hardly ever, but it kind of reminded me just how bad the Hornets are going to be, and looking at that roster and what they've gone from over the past few seasons, and kind of just remembering some of the legitimately the most confusing decisions I've ever seen a franchise make over the past few seasons. I need to rant about them. So today we're going to rant about the Charlotte Hornets. I'm going to talk about what has gone so wrong for them the past few years and why I'm so annoyed and kind of frustrated with what they've been doing. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy. Let's go ahead and rant about Charlotte. Let's start things off by flashing back a couple seasons ago. In the 2020 NBA draft, they selected LaMelo Ball 3rd overall, which they got very lucky that he fell to them at 3, but you need some luck in the NBA, so that's their bit of luck, and it gave them a franchise point guard almost immediately after they traded their other one to the Boston Celtics in Kemba Walker for Gordon Hayward and Terry Rozier an offseason ago, and I thought this was a pretty good trade. You get a guy in Gordon Hayward who is a solid veteran piece. You can flip him down the line if you want to, or just keep him as a role player trying to stay a little bit competitive. And Terry Rozier, he was a solid young guard, had some fun moments with Boston, giving him more opportunity now. Maybe he can go ahead and blossom. I thought it was a pretty fine deal. I overall liked that offseason a bit, and then heading into the season, you had some fun moments. LaMelo throwing lobs to people, Terry Rozier was playing well, Gordon Hayward looked like a fringe all-star at times, LaMelo also won Rookie of the Year, James Borrego looked like a solid coach. It looked like their rebuild was off to a pretty good start, and they ended up making the play-in as the 10 seed. They did get blown out by the Indiana Pacers, but you know, it was good progress for a team kind of in their first year of rebuilding, and then some bad things started to happen really when we get to 2021. In the 2021 draft, they made some pretty good picks, and they got 3 guys that I really liked. James Bouknight was a name that I thought the Thunder could maybe draft at 6. They took him at 11. He fell past a couple of teams, and the Hornets managed to pick him up. He was a solid combo guard who could score. He was more athletic than I think people give him credit for, and he felt like he could be a fun backcourt partner long term next to LaMelo Ball, be a bit of a scorer, someone that can penetrate, get downhill, and attack the defense, something the Hornets really needed. And, you know, they also added guys like Kai Jones and JT Thor, 2 solid athletic bigs who really fit well next to LaMelo. You want to give LaMelo Ball some high flyers, some guys that can go up, catch lobs, give them a bit of rim protection, athletic guys like that. And so Kai Jones in particular, I was really excited about. They got him at the 19th overall pick, and then JT Thor at pick 37, a bit more of a, you know, not as high of a ceiling guy as Kai Jones, but just another high flyer in the front court who made sense next to a guy like LaMelo Ball. Then they traded for Mason Plumlee, which was a bit weird, but they did need a starting center. Both of those guys I mentioned are a bit raw to go ahead and start right away, so it made sense to go ahead and get a guy like Mason Plumlee while those other 2 kind of develop behind him. He's a fine big. You know, I didn't think he was going to be anything long term, but he was better than Bismack Biyombo and Cody Zeller, who they had the year before. They also signed James Borrego to a multi-year extension. Terry Rozier got an extension too. They brought in Kelly Oubre in free agency, who was just 25 at the time he was signed, just 26 now, which I thought was a fine signing too. And I was excited to watch the Hornets this next season. They were fun for the most part, but there are a lot of things that bothered me. One of the most immediately frustrating things was the lack of a big for LaMelo. Mason Plumlee looked washed almost the first second he stepped on the court, and he really struggled. He wasn't a real lob threat, and he couldn't rim protect, so the Hornets basically had no defense because, you know, you can have teams like the Jazz, who didn't have many great perimeter defenders last season, but they had Rudy Gobert, who's a great rim protector, so they could get away with that. The Hornets didn't have good defenders on the perimeter, or anyone to guard down low, so it was overall kind of a mess defensively. They also traded for Montrezl Harrell, who they decided was the answer midway through the season, who's a 6'7" power forward slash center who is really only good as a 6-man and still provides no defense, no rim protection whatsoever. Sure, he's a bit more of a lob threat than Mason Plumlee is, which is cool, but you need someone that can help you play defense. It made no sense that he was the guy that they targeted. Miles Turner is a name that I've been looking at for this Hornets team for years at this point, and they still really haven't even been rumored to look in his direction, which is frustrating because he'd be such a perfect fit for this team, or just any number of decent rim protecting bigs, but instead they got Plumlee and then they brought in Montrezl Harrell. It just didn't make sense. And then you look at the guys that they drafted. They gave none of their draft picks any consistent playtime, which is weird for a team that's trying to get better and is young. they were playing their veterans, guys that they had on the roster for a good bit. And I understand trying to, compete and get better, but when you spend draft picks on these guys, you have to give them some sort of solid play time. You spent an 11th overall pick on James Bouknight. You played him 9.8 minutes per game in 31 games. Now, sure, he wasn't great in those minutes that he played, but it's so hard to establish a rhythm as a young guard in the NBA when you get no solid run. He hardly ever got up off the bench last season. And then you had guys like Kai Jones and JT Thor. Kai Jones averaged 3 minutes per game in the 21 games that he showed up in, and JT Thor averaged 7.9 minutes per game in the 33 games that he showed up in. Once again, they didn't play phenomenal in that play time, but they didn't have any chance to establish a good rhythm. These three guys are supposed to be pieces for your future, and they're not playing because of Mason Plumlee. They had Ish Smith on the roster who played 37 games, and they signed Isaiah Thomas, who, I love IT, don't get me wrong, but IT's in his mid-30s. You are a team that is trying to make it out of the play and trying to get better as a young team. Why are you playing Isaiah Thomas over James Bouknight, who could potentially be the starting backcourt member next to LaMelo Ball for the future for your franchise? Why are you not giving him that run? Why are you not giving him opportunities and reps next to LaMelo Ball and Miles Bridges, who broke out as an all-star last year before circumstances arose this past offseason, and he's no longer on the Hornets or even in the league, which is a good thing. But now you've just got kind of LaMelo as the sole piece. If you had spent this past season developing like James Bouknight or Kai Jones or JT Thor a bit, then you'd be in a bit of a better spot. But now just really the sole young guy on your team that has shown like high level potential is LaMelo Ball. You've got like PJ Washington, who I think is a pretty solid piece and kind of a glue guy long term, but he's not going to be a franchise cornerstone next to LaMelo Ball. It's just not going to happen. So you wasted all of these guys' rookie seasons, and this is where a lot of my confusion and frustration comes in with the Charlotte Hornets. They're a team that has consistently made decisions both ways. You cannot be in that middle ground in the NBA for too long. Otherwise, things start to fall apart. You have to either start to rebuild or fully commit to trying to build this core up and try and win a championship. You cannot just stay in that middle ground forever. You have to eventually make a decision and make a call. And they've tried to kind of have it both ways. There are moments where like they'll trade for Montrezl Harrell or they'll play Isaiah Thomas over James Bouknight. They will make these moves that it seems like they're trying to win now. But then they've got moves like they spend 3 draft picks. If they were trying to really compete and win now, with James Bouknight or Kai Jones, maybe they could have traded one or both of those picks for more win now players. Maybe they could have done that, but instead they drafted these young guys, which makes sense. You're still a young team. I still think it wasn't time to really go all in and trade your first round picks, but then you have to play the guys. You can't just leave them on the bench rotting for a full season when they need that play time and they need time to develop and get better next to your franchise player at the moment in LaMelo Ball. It just doesn't make sense. And if you're trying to also rebuild like it seems like they might be going towards now, because, they didn't bring in a center, Mason Plumlee is still their starting center, which giving LaMelo Ball, one of the best playmakers in the NBA amongst young guards, Mason Plumlee as his starting center, as his primary lob threat and a rim protector should basically be a felony in my eyes. It feels like you're trying to lose. It feels like you're not trying to build up the team to the best it can be. You see how it's kind of both ways, how it feels like they're making like some moves to try and compete, but other times they're just kind of sitting on their hands and doing nothing. And then they're trying to do things to rebuild, like spending 2 first-round picks on 2 young guys, but then they don't play them. And now they're both frustrated. Why aren't we playing? Why aren't we getting chance to run over guys that are not going to be on the team long term? And if you're really trying to rebuild, why don't you trade like Gordon Hayward or Terry Rozier? But those 2 guys are still on the roster. And why was there a rumor at some point during the year that they were going to trade for Russell Westbrook? I don't get it. They are just completely all over the place. And then you've got a situation like you had the coaching situation where they fired James Borrego after getting blown out in the play-in tournament, which, sure, fine. You want to go ahead, trade James Borrego. It makes sense. I saw some rumors that he lost the locker room and he wasn't well respected anymore. Sure, maybe you need a change of culture and pace after losing 2 straight play-in games, getting blown out. Sure, I completely understand that. But you have to get the coaching search right. And I thought they found a pretty good name in Kenny Atkinson. He did a really good job a couple years ago elevating that D'Lo-led Nets team to a legitimate playoff team. D'Lo became an all-star. Karis LeVert looked like a most improved player before he got injured. He feels like a good transition coach. I like Kenny Atkinson a lot. but he ended up declining the job after previously agreeing to it because the Golden State Warriors went on a finals run. He's like, oh, this is pretty cool to win a finals, and he decided to stay in Golden State. Sure, understandable. The Hornets, that's kind of a mess, but you can still get it right. There are still names out there that you can go for. Mike D'Antoni was a guy that was rumored. It would have been fun to see LaMelo play with him, but then they'd have to get a center other than Mason Plumlee, and the Hornets refused to do that. But a name that you should not bring in my opinion, is Steve Clifford. I don't understand why they brought him back. He is a guy that has been here before. You tried him out. It didn't work. It's not like he was a legendary coach once that left for a bit, like a Phil Jackson where, you brought him in and he came and he had some success, but he stepped away. And then a few years later, you're like, come on back, help us win in a new era. He was under 500 in his time. He had one playoff appearance as their head coach. It was not a good tenure. Why are you bringing him now to be in the leader of this rebuild? The Magic had him for a young team and they were never very good. I don't understand why Steve Clifford is now getting another job for this Hornets team, why he's getting this new opportunity. It doesn't make sense to me. Why not bring in some young guy who's kind of new to the league? He's a newer face. I'm of the opinion that young teams should seek out new faces. Guys that have been assistant coaches for a long time and are looking for that breakthrough as a head coach. Not your previous head coach who you fired and now are bringing back again to lead this new era. It doesn't make sense. He's a coach that feels like he's going to try and win now, and he probably won't play the young players the minutes they need to play. He's like supposed to be a good defensive coach, which sure, you were a terrible defense, but I think more of the problem is, once again, you have no rim protection and no great defenders in your starting lineup. I don't think it's the coach that's the reason your defense stinks. I think it's the personnel. I am just all over the place. It is really confusing. And then in this past draft, they brought Mark Williams, who I do like, out of Duke. I think he can be a solid player in a few years, but they also passed up on Jalen Duren, who was right there. They selected him, but traded him. You had a guy, he's a great lob threat. He's a better playmaker than people give him credit for. In my opinion, he could be like a Bam Adebayo light type player, but you didn't take him. You let him go in kind of this weird trade. I don't understand it. It just feels like they're all over the place, that they don't have a direction. And it's really frustrating for me as a Thunder fan who I don't have any stock in their success despite liking LaMelo, but I'm sure for Hornets fans, it is incredibly frustrating. So overall, what should your takeaways be from this video? Number one, the Hornets are going to be really bad. They've got no depth. They were already a 10 seed. They lost a 20-point per game score in Miles Bridges. They're going to be pretty bad. It's going to be a really rough season for Hornets fans, but that is probably for the best in my opinion. Despite all of the slander I just gave them, I still think the best route for them is being terrible this season and trying to get a top draft pick. If you can put Victor Wembanyama or Scoot Henderson or even Amin Thompson next to a guy like LaMelo Ball, that goes a long way, because even before all this drama, it never really felt like they had a core that, without going and, being in another draft, like say they just continue to make the play in the next few years and eventually, maybe they become a playoff team, a duo of LaMelo and Miles Bridges with the role players they had was never going to really get them to where they wanted to go. They needed more guys in the draft, and I think that now that they're going to be bad, they're going to be forced to go ahead and try and go get some of those guys, or maybe they play themselves into like an 8th pick and they continue to ruin things. We'll see with the Hornets, but I do think that this rebuild is for the best. LaMelo's still going to be LaMelo. He will still be fun to watch, but I do kind of wonder if maybe he's a name that could be looked at as a trade target soon, because it feels like their rebuild is kind of restarting now. You've got a guy like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, because of course I'm going to bring the Thunder into this, where people talk about like, oh, the Thunder should trade Shai, he doesn't fit their timeline, where Shai does fit the timeline because the Thunder's rebuild is supposed to be over in like another year or two. That is the ultimate goal. That is the goal, to try and compete within the next few seasons after building up through the draft after a few years. At that point, he'll be like 25, 26. He definitely still fits the timeline. But a guy like LaMelo Ball, this is going to be the Hornets' first year of really being bad again since he got here. And, well, bad as in not a play-in team. But now it's like you're going to go ahead and go get maybe a guy like Victor Wembanyama or Scoot Henderson, who I think both will be really good almost immediately. But you'll still probably be bad because you still don't have this phenomenal supporting cast, and the East looks stacked for years to come. So it feels like they're probably still 3 to 4 years away from being a consistent playoff team of any kind. And that could be a long time for LaMelo Ball to wait at this point. We will see, because at that point it will be like 6-7 years of him being here and never having made the playoffs. We'll see with LaMelo. I'm not too sure if that really is going to be an issue, but I wouldn't be surprised if his name starts to pop up in some trade rumors here and there. Once again, it could be complete smoke like it is with a lot of other small market stars, but he's just a name I could see popping up. So if you see him pop up, go ahead, come back to this video because I told you so. And with that being said, I think that's all I have to say about Charlotte. I just kind of wanted to rant for a little bit. I'm just frustrated with the direction they're going. And yesterday, like I said, I talked about the Hornets for a bit at the end of that video, and a few of y'all said you wanted to see this video, so here you go. I think the coming days, I'm probably going to make a couple prediction videos in terms of standings as well as awards, so be on the lookout for those. I also want to drop a video about the Brooklyn Nets. I have a couple Thunder videos coming up soon, so if you're a Thunder fan like me, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and if you're not, also leave a like and subscribe or I'll be very sad. With that being said, I appreciate y'all watching. I will see y'all later. Real one, say it back.